Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Whether it's Kroger's Simple Truth Turkey or mac and cheese with Murray's English Cheddar or pie made with fresh Cosmic Crisp apples, there are many dishes we look forward to sharing during the holidays. And Kroger has all the fresh ingredients you need to turn today's holidays into tomorrow's memories. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Choose from a great selection of digital coupons and use them up to 5 times in one transaction. Check our app for details. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Hello and welcome to Real Life Ghost Stories, episode 1. Are you excited?
I am excited, yeah. Really excited.
I don't know if that really conveys your excitement. I am Emma, and Real Life Ghost Stories is exactly what it says on the tin. It is about real life ghost stories. I am really interested in how people perceive the paranormal.
And I'm just scared of everything.
Yeah, and Dan is the opposite of that. He is literally just scared of everything. So his perspective is always going to be that it's paranormal. Always. No matter what happens, it's paranormal. But our plan for this podcast is to hear people's real life ghost stories and also speak to people who absolutely do not believe in the paranormal. But for our first episode, we're just going to let you get to know us a little bit.
Yes. Sorry, you can't see me nodding, but I did a very firm nod.
Yeah, they can't
of agreement.
So I'm Emma.
And I'm Dan.
And let's get cracking. The first thing we're going to do, actually, is do a review for you on a TV show that we have recently finished. We'll probably do a review every week because we spend a lot of our time watching ridiculous paranormal stuff. Most of it I just hate.
And I love it all, every bit of it.
And Dan loves it all, which is obviously why it's good to get
apart from that one with Vet Building, because that's nonsense. Most haunted. Yeah, she's got like 200 people running around her house and then wondering why there's noises. It's a bit weird, really. But
I mean, I'd argue the same thing for Ghost Adventures.
No,
but
there's only 4 of them.
Are there?
Yeah.
Do you remember when we watched Demon House and there was loads of people in it?
Yes, I do. But that was a movie, so they had to make it.
Okay, right.
Add more people.
Sorry. But our first review is Haunting of Hill House. It is a series on Netflix. It's got 10 episodes. Everyone is talking about it. I kept seeing it everywhere. So all over my Facebook feed was Haunting of Hill House, how scary it was, how people were like vomiting and dying while they were watching it. At present, it's got about 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good.
And no related deaths either, as far as I'm aware. Nobody has actually died from watching it so far.
I thought you meant like within the cast.
No.
The Exorcist.
I meant from watching it.
Or was it The Exorcist where somebody died?
Yeah, and The Crow. That wasn't really a horror film though.
I don't know. I've never seen it.
It's a good film.
So what was your thoughts?
I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was really good. I think it's one of those things you run the risk of overhyping, which is really common with the Netflix/Facebook era. Every time they release something that's scary, it's the scariest thing that's ever featured on Netflix ever. But this one was actually really good. It was suitably terrifying, is my description.
Yeah, it was. There was plenty of times when we both really jumped while we were watching it. I really liked it. I did have like issues with it. So the guy who plays the dad is a terrible actor. Timothy Hutton is his name.
Oh, look at that for research.
You see, did some research. But the series is based around one family, and it dips between their past and their present. And in their past, they lived in the very haunted Hill House. It's all about how that has impacted their present. And it's really interesting to watch the characters grow up and stuff. But, I mean, they should have just got the same guy to play the dad the whole way through, because, my God, he was awful.
He was unbelievably bad. It was like the guy was playing, I said this to Emma when we were watching it was like the guy was playing Nicolas Cage playing the father, if that makes sense. That's how bad it was.
Which was a really weirdly accurate description of...
I'd be interested to hear how many of you agree with that.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. But also, the other thing that really wound me up, and I ended up losing focus, because I do lose focus really quickly, but nobody, by the end of the series, nobody seemed capable of having a normal conversation.
No,
everybody
not at all.
spoke in really drawn out monologues.
Yeah.
That were really weirdly poetic. It was like a stage play by the end of it, and you know, everybody had their moment in the limelight, but nobody had a normal conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that potentially could have been done in like a feature-length movie. There was a lot of stuff, like Emma said, when they're doing pointless monologues where you're just like, well, they're doing that so they can get 10 episodes out of this. But I still think it was really a good idea to make it a series rather than a film, because they were able to explore some things that you wouldn't have been able to do in the space of a movie, is my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I think in terms of the horror genre, like it was really good because it moved away from that sort of gratuitous violence that kind of seems to be, I don't know, a little bit indicative of the horror genre at the moment. Yeah. Like, you know, American Horror Story is like obviously really good, but it does have a lot of sex and violence, and I think it was kind of trying to play on that Game of Thrones, everybody can watch it but it's a little bit risque type thing. But this was very subtle. And also, what if you do watch it, if you have watched it or are watching it at the moment, watch out for all the ghosts in the background.
So many.
Yeah, we
so many more than we
them.
even noticed. We did notice some of them because there was a particular moment where a woman appeared in the background which freaked me out because she's horrendous looking. I thought she was going to play a part in the story, but she wasn't. She was just one of the ones in the background. But do keep a lookout for them, because that is a nice little niche of it. That's not even the right word. Nuance.
Yeah, nuance. Better.
Still begins with N. Ends with a C. No, it doesn't.
Oh,
I was going to say something really relevant as well.
I'm concerned as how relevant
some of the
it was.
No, yeah, because some of the fear that it creates is based off the anticipation that you know it is a horror film or horror series, and so it's that anticipation of what's going to be horrific about it, which makes it quite tense at moments. Let's be honest, everybody's going to binge it in one sitting anyway.
Yeah, we had to kind of space it out a bit, so because we both work. It wasn't possible to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning.
But had we started watching on a Saturday, it might have been done in one sit.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's very true. But yeah, so absolutely would recommend. Go and watch it if you haven't already, and if you're wondering what all the fuss is about. Just, yeah, keep an eye out for those monologues, and Timothy Hutton cannot act. But interestingly, found out today the guy who plays the dad in the past is Elliot from E.T. That blew my mind.
Craziness. I knew he looked familiar, but I just couldn't place it. I also don't know why he didn't play the older dad either. I don't know why they got another actor in to do that, but...
Interesting fact about me, E.T. absolutely petrified me as a child. Like, I mean, to a degree where I would lie in bed and be terrified that E.T. was going to come through my door. You know the bit where he leaves down, like, is it M&M's or Skittles or whatever?
Yeah, what is it? It's M&M's, isn't it?
I think it might be M&M's. But anyway, whatever he leaves down for him, I thought that was going to happen to me, even though I had not left a trail of anything.
The probability was quite high, I'd imagine.
What, that I was going to have E.T. come through my door?
Not just any alien, but actual
E.T.
Yeah.
I was just so terrified of it. And that's probably still why I hate any talk of aliens to this day. I just can't bear it. It freaks me out so much.
And I mean, it was a biopic about a real-life character from the Star Wars universe, so...
You're so annoying. So what I'd like to talk about today is my paranormal experience. And I don't really... This is really hard. I do believe in ghosts, but I don't believe in most ghost stories. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when we watch things like Ghost Adventures...
Which is obviously 100% true all the time.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Did you hear that little girl?
If you picked that up on the mic, it was definitely our neighbours. Dan likes to believe... I think you like to believe everything.
I do like to believe everything. I'm a little bit sceptical about some things that Ghost Adventures do. Like, I don't see the point of that little stickman camera. That's just...
that motion,
look, there's a
whatever it
ghost
is.
standing next to you dancing. Woohoo. And it's like a stickman thing. But I like there's definitely some audible stuff on there where I'm a bit like, ooh, that's a bit odd.
Yeah,
And
there
the
is. There is, but I also... We're not going to talk about Ghost Adventures now,
No, we're
because
not, sorry.
we could do a whole episode on that. But the point is that I believe in ghosts, but I don't believe in most ghost stories. I think that's what makes it a little bit interesting for me to talk about people people's paranormal experiences, because people often are quite polarized. They either really believe it because they have a story, or they absolutely refuse to believe it and try and find an explanation for everything. I think there's two opposite opinions on the whole thing.
Yeah, I also think there's almost three scenarios. So there's the people that have seen something and believe it, and there's people that haven't seen anything and go against it, and then there's people that like to think that they've seen something that go 100% on board and get a lot of stuff askew. Because I tend to find like the people with the most believable stories are the ones that are really understated. So they won't be like, oh yeah, I believe in ghosts, but they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm not sure, but this one time I saw like this headless woman and she touched me, and you're like, ooh,
and I still have a scar to this day,
yeah, and
then like, I died and I'm actually a ghost. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, at least 3 people have told me that story. So
really,
yeah,
that's mad. Yeah. I cannot believe you met so many dead people.
Yeah,
you're like that kid from The Sixth Sense
all the time.
So I'm going to tell you my ghost story. This is the reason that I believe in ghosts, because I still can't find any explanation for it, and even talking about it now makes me feel a bit funny. But I used to work in basically a Victorian asylum. I started working there when I was 17, and I mean,
are you that old?
Oh, because I've never heard that before. And do you know what other joke I've heard so many times? Oh, you used to work there. Are you sure you weren't a patient?
A bit of Shutter Island going on there.
Oh, don't, because then I'll get paranoid.
No,
that was actually the case.
It's not the case, I don't think.
It might be.
Okay.
But I used to work in a Victorian asylum, and I'm actually 28. Thank you for all you people that are wondering if I am a Victorian ghost. I'm not.
This is actually a really strong EVP session. It's not a podcast.
That's exactly what it is. This is proof of the paranormal. I'm actually dead. And I started working there in, oh God, it was about 2007 maybe. The year that I started working there, they had I guess what you'd call an exorcism mass. So for those who don't know, I was raised in Ireland, which is obviously a very Catholic country. I mean, not so much anymore, but it's still essentially a Catholic country. They had an exorcism mass, and while that sounds really dramatic and like people were being...
It sounds really dramatic. Like, I want to know what an exorcism mass is, because it sounds mental.
It's not like... So, I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't witness this mass, but it wasn't like The Exorcist, where people were like vomiting and, you know...
I kind of imagined it like, you know, when you go up to take the sacrament, like that, but instead of getting the sacrament, you just get the demons taken out of you.
You just get holy water thrown in your face, like a surprise attack. Yeah. Everybody else is getting First Holy Communion and you're being like exorcised.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that at all. Sorry. They had this exorcism mass, and essentially people had started to get really frightened of working the night shift. At night time, they would hear footsteps on the top floor. So the building was split into 3 floors, and the top floor was a day room, the middle floor was a dormitory, and the bottom floor was a day room and dormitory. So the top floor just wasn't used at night time, and at about 7 o'clock in the evening the doors would be locked and nobody would be allowed in there again. But people started hearing footsteps at night time, and stuff was getting moved around, and people started to get really freaked out. And I guess for me, it felt like a lot of it was perpetuated by stories. So people would hear footsteps and then they'd go, but a patient was murdered on the stairs, which is true. That did happen. But if you hear footsteps that could be coming from anywhere, and then somebody tells you a patient was murdered, you immediately go, that's it.
Yep.
We're all going to die.
Absolutely.
We're all haunted. This is terrible.
That Christchurch, there's the tall building there called the Fisher Building or something like that.
Oh yeah, I'm always in there.
With the light. No, it's on the original campus. It's not.
No, I know. The Fisher Building.
So
with
the
light
tower,
on the top,
yeah. So they always leave the light on the top there, and they say it's because a student committed suicide, and if you look at the right time, you can see it goes. I think it's just they forget to turn it off, but it makes a cooler story, doesn't it? And people can make the connection.
Yeah, and when people make that connection, if you put it into an atmosphere that is violent and aggressive and sometimes dangerous, it kind of becomes these mad stories, and it's easier to believe them. So my mum used to work in the same building, and she worked nights and never heard a thing. But I think if she would, my mum would just be like, whatever. Don't care, not interested. No demon would ever try and possess my mum because she's too scary.
Oh no.
Yeah, so people used to say like there was sadness built into the walls. And I think there was, like, the way the patients were treated in the Victorian times and much later was horrendous. So awful things happen, and patients did die in awful circumstances. And I think that all allowed people to orchestrate a narrative where there were, ghosts running around upstairs. But when I was speaking to nursing staff about this, one of them said to me, "Oh no, I've seen it happen." And I said, "What do you mean?" Me being kind of interested in what he had to say. And at night time, there was 2 male staff nurses on, and they heard footsteps and furniture moving upstairs. So they both went upstairs to make sure nobody had broken in, because obviously you're in a place with lots of medication. Nothing was wrong when they went upstairs, so they turned on all the lights.
Yeah.
And some of the furniture had been moved around, and they were getting a little bit freaked. And then this nurse, his name is Alan, said that he literally watched the light panel on the wall. He watched each switch go off one by one, and the lights go off one by one.
I would never go back to work again if
I'd seen
that. Ever.
So they decided, to go back downstairs and just pretty much ignore it. But he was really freaked out by it. And then the nurse that was with him had been there a long time, and he was like, "Oh, the place is haunted." And, who knows? It could have been just a story. But I worked there for, I think it was nearly 5 years in the end. I never had any paranormal experiences. Like, there was parts of the building, because the building was enormous. There was parts of the building that made me feel uncomfortable and made me feel weird, but nothing that couldn't be put down to being alone in a massive building.
Yeah, that's scary enough at its own time, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a big old building that has all the old fittings and looks terrifying. So it's understandable to be a little bit freaked out when you're on your own.
I mean, it probably was a demon, but
according to you, everything is a demon. So I don't know if I can take what you say as Bible, to be honest.
Interesting turn of phrase there, talking about demons and Bibles. But
don't.
So there were places that you were a bit uncomfortable in.
Yeah, there were. Yeah,
but you didn't have any experiences for.
No, not for the first 4 years I was there. And there was one of the places I was really uncomfortable was this big long corridor. And I think it's that idea of being chased down a big long corridor, or you don't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Corridors are quite restrictive as well.
Yeah, so you've nowhere to hide, you've nowhere to run to except forward or backward. So big long corridors in it used to freak me out, and probably psychologically that was why. One morning I went to work, and it was a Monday morning. It was a bank holiday Monday, and it was snowing. I always remember it because I had just started driving and I crashed my car on the way to work. But that's beside the point. I've improved now with age. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was on my break, and I was stood outside smoking a cigarette, and another girl was with me. I looked up, and in the building opposite me, and it was 3 floors up in the middle window, there was a woman staring back at me. And I don't mean, she wasn't misty, she wasn't see-through, she didn't appear and then disappear. She was stood there staring back at me.
How many female patients did you have?
We had about 15.
And it definitely wasn't a female patient?
It absolutely was not a female patient.
And what made it so categorical? Is that because you knew all the patients?
Well, I knew all the patients.
Yeah.
This building that was now used as an admin building. And because it was a bank holiday Monday, there was no admin staff in, right? And that gets important later. But I looked at her and she looked at me. She acknowledged, not acknowledged me, she didn't wave or wink, but I felt like she was watching me.
Yep.
Not like that she was some sort of, ghost caught in time and was reliving something. She was aware of my presence.
As someone in a window high up would do if they could see people below.
Yeah, so, and she didn't disappear. She just drifted away from the window. So while I was watching her, she moved to my left away from the window. And it was a really unnatural movement. And it was only at that point that I went, something is not right here. Because previously I was like, oh shit, I've been caught smoking. I'm not supposed to be out smoking. I'm supposed to be in working because my break was over 10 minutes ago. But that was my first thought. Then I sort of thought about what she had looked like, and I can still see her now, and this is the bit that really freaks me out, because it's amazing what your brain doesn't register at instantaneously. And I saw her, and she had sort of shoulder length wavy black hair. She was wearing a white dress, which really makes it sound very wanky, and stereotypical
Victorian ghost story,
doesn't it? Which is really annoying. I wish she was wearing tracky bottoms and a hoodie.
That would be amazing.
Drinking a can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I'd be like, God damn it, somebody's broken in. She didn't have eyes, which is the terrifying part.
You said she looked at you though.
But she was watching me. This is the bit that makes it really unbelievable.
Yeah.
I knew that she had registered that I was there and she was watching me. But she had like dark hollows for eyes.
Okay, so it wasn't like a Ken doll downstairs. It was like...
No, she wasn't like an eye eunuch.
I was just imagining like a smooth forehead straight into a nose, because that would be kind of scary as well. Yeah, wouldn't it?
That's awful.
Yeah, that's what I had.
Can you imagine?
That'd be awful. It'd be terrible.
Oh my God.
That's what I was thinking, but no, she had
like, and it sounds really Hollywoodized and ridiculous, but that was what she looked like, and it only registered with me in the moments that she drifted away.
Yeah.
And
but you would have also got some kind of glimpse as to where she was looking if she had hollows, like even if she didn't have eyes.
Yeah, so she definitely was looking down at me. And, it was just giving me the heebie-jeebies even thinking about it. Makes me sick. But there was the girl that I was with, I never said anything because I just didn't. I don't know why I didn't say anything, but I didn't. And then about 30 seconds later, the girl I was with just ran, like full pelt ran. And a lot of our patients were quite violent, so all of our doors had big, those big old like prison keys.
Nice.
And to get into the door, to each door, you had to have a master key. And she was frantically trying to get her keys in the door, and I was going, "Oh my God, what is it? What's wrong?" And she was like, "Did you not see that girl?" And I was like,
I've got actual like goosebumps. I've heard this story before as well.
And I was like, "Well, yeah, I did see her actually." And then she really freaked out. Like, she was really, really panicked about it. And I said, "No, we're not going to panic. I'm going to go speak to somebody in case somebody has broken into that building." So I went to the nurse in charge and I explained to her what happened. She immediately was like, "It's a ghost. It is a ghost." And I was like, "Well, it might not be. Like, somebody might have broken into that building and we have an obligation to make sure that somebody hasn't."
Yeah, absolutely. Or could it have been one of your patients up there?
Could have easily been one of the patients who had like gotten out, whatever, these things sometimes happen. But I went to find a security guard and I ended up finding a guy who was a psychiatric nurse. And he was kind of in charge of who went to the buildings that day. And I never met him before. Like, I didn't know who he was, but I just went up to him and I said, "Can you please check and see who's meant to be in the child and family admin offices today?" And he said, "Nobody." And I was like, "No, but you need to check." I explained to him what happened. And in his psychiatrist way, he started talking about like shared hallucinations and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, "No, I appreciate that, but I'm not telling you I saw a ghost. I'm telling you I saw a woman."
Yeah.
And I want you to go...
kind of needs to investigate.
Yeah, I need you to investigate it. So he did, in fairness to him. And I think he was only trying to like placate me because he thought, look at this mental bitch. Is she actually a patient? But he
No. Oh, okay, just checking.
Now I don't know because you said all that Shutter Island stuff and I feel really paranoid that I actually was.
You got out now, so you must be better.
I'm actually Leonardo DiCaprio. But so he went and checked the sign in, I guess, for who was meant to be in that building, and there was nobody meant to be in. We checked all the doors, and those particular doors were more modernised and they had the code locks. And he was like, if anybody had gotten in, those alarms would be going off. Checked everything, there was nobody in the building and no way for anybody to get into the building.
And actually, it's not like if it was someone that had broken in, the alarms would have been going. And if it was someone that might have not given their intention to be there, but was there accidentally,
the alarms would have been going.
Yeah, and they're also, or if they'd have known how to reset the alarm, there's no actual reason for them to keep themselves concealed, would they? They'd just be like, "Oh yeah, sorry, it's me." Yeah,
so there was kind of, for me, and I know somebody listening to this is going to go, "Well, surely this is what happened." For me, there was no logical explanation to it. When I think about it now and the fact that it has stayed with me, all these years later, I can still see her face. Like, something happened in that moment that wasn't human. Like, it wasn't. And I spoke to lots of people about it because I just found the whole story really interesting. And the guy who told me the story originally about the light switches on the wall, I was telling him about it. And he rolled up his sleeves. All the hair in his arms were standing up on end. And I said, "Alan, what is it?" And he just went, "I see her all of the time." Whoa. And I was like, what do you mean? So he used to work the night shift.
Yep.
And when you worked the night shift, all the patients would be in bed and they slept in these big dormitories. And at the end of the dormitory, you'd have a night office, which was all glass. So you could obviously see who was coming and going and if patients were getting up to go to the toilet, whatever it was. When he was working the night shift, he used to be in the night office and he'd see in his peripheral vision a patient run past regularly.
Yep.
The first couple of times he got up and checked. And there was never a patient out of bed. There was never anybody disturbed or never anybody anywhere else in the building. So he was like, eventually I just stopped checking. Because he said she has long black hair and a white dress, or a white, like, whatever. Yeah. And that was all he could see of her. But he used to see her all the time, and always only in his peripheral vision, like running by. But you could easily explain that as it's a night shift, you're exhausted.
Dark as well. You see things in the dark that sometimes
you
aren't there as well,
but
you?
I don't know if you see things. Do you ever see things that are moving in the dark?
No, very rarely.
Do you know you see things like you look at your coat hanging up and you think, that's it, I'm going to be murdered?
Yeah, and then you stare at it, waiting for it to move, and it never really moves, and you just fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then you have nightmares. About blue-faced ladies.
The blue-faced ladies. This is Dan's current nightmares about the blue-faced lady, and it's directly related to The Haunting of Hill House,
But he's not a character in The
Haunting.
No,
it's not. Well, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is my life. This is what I live with. Just ramblings about the blue-faced lady. So what are your thoughts?
I don't like it because it's scary. But I've got lots of questions in terms of, like, who do you think it was? Do you get the impression it was like a patient, or do you think it might have been like the old matron, if that's the right word?
No, I felt like it was a patient.
Okay.
And I don't know, like, but then I think my ideas about that are like influenced. So, I have a psychic aunt.
Yes.
Not an ant like the creature, an insect, just to clarify.
You actually pronounced it aunt then. Like,
did I?
Yeah. It was clear. Like, I knew what you were talking about. Sometimes
I'm losing
I do think
my accent.
Yeah. Sometimes I do think you're talking about an insect, but
I'm not.
Okay.
A tiny, tiny little psychic insect. How great would that be?
They do exist.
Okay, no. Yeah, sorry, they do exist. See what I mean about Dan believing everything is really annoying. But my psychic aunt, I was talking to her about it, and she said, oh, she's a patient. Her name is Sarah. She was put in because I don't know, I can't remember what she said actually, so I clearly didn't listen that well. Because she got pregnant out of wedlock, which happened all the time.
Yeah, they're all really common things that you could say. You worked in a lunatic asylum, so a patient, 90% probably likely to be a patient. Sarah, very common name.
Yeah, and in Ireland, to be incarcerated because you got pregnant out of wedlock was really common.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
So you can see how there's like loads of anger in one particular building and in one place.
Yeah.
And obviously people are going to feel that, but yeah.
So do you think she appears, I was going to say apparates, but that's not the right word, is it? Appears. We'll use appears. Do you think that she appears as a result of the energy that has been there for 100 years, of the sadness and the anger and the things like that? Or do you think that it doesn't work like that?
I don't really know, because I never saw her again. And there's a part of me that's like, God damn it, just come and talk to me. Or like, I don't know, like why bother just appearing and fucking eyeball or lack of eyeball me from a window and then disappear? Like, it just seems really pointless. And that's what frustrates me about it. And the whole bit about her appearing, at nighttime when nurses are working and blah, 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 blah. Like, there's no evidence of that. There's no proof of that. And working the night shift is too much. There's too much in that to, there's too much tiredness, too much lack of awareness as to what's actually going on around you to say that, oh, definitely 100% she used to appear all the time. It's just a good part of the story.
Yeah.
If I was to say, like, is she a result of all the anger and all the sadness? No, I think she's just an entity in her own right.
Yeah. Because you said that you felt like she was actually looking at you, and it wasn't like because there's some sort of theories that, like, a lot of ghosts are just residual energy, so they do things that they were doing when they were alive, and it's just
so
like
knocking about, like, but why are they never knocking about doing like weird stuff? The way like residual energy, and they talk about how yes they're putting the kettle on or whatever, but why all the weird stuff you do in secret, like talking to yourself in the car?
Well, you don't know that they're not doing that because you only hear bits of it, don't you? So like,
yeah, but if you were like living in a big castle that was haunted,
yeah,
why are you not seeing like entities? I don't know.
Taking a dump.
Having a shit. Just having a shit.
Or maybe
like if that's what you spend 90% of your time doing when you're alive, which is obviously what the average human, that is the amount of time the average human spends having a shit.
Yeah.
But why are they not doing like weird stuff? Why are they not? There's that reason there, where it's like, why are ghosts all like old Victorian ghosts? Why are they not? Why are you not woken up in the middle of the night by somebody shouting Britney? Like that guy. Yeah. What was that meme? Where he's like, leave Britney alone.
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
Like, why does that not happen?
That's a good question, but maybe it will. Maybe it takes a certain amount of time to pass before you start seeing them. Like, maybe it's, I don't know, it's an interesting idea. Because I tend to think, like, footsteps would be, like, you were saying about the footsteps that they used to hear. I tend to think that they would be, like, residual. Like, I feel like that would just be something that happened. Like, if you think how many times you walk up and down a hall, or even if you work in Sainsbury's, how many times you walk, or Haunted Sainsbury's is a good story. How many times you walk up and down an aisle, like the amount of footsteps it's just a constant imprint, isn't it? And now they say, you know how they say like stone and natural stuff, I'm going off on a massive tangent,
yeah, go on.
Stuff, like holds that energy.
But I think that's absolute shite. That is just bandied around by these, you know, paranormal experts in inverted commas. Like, why are you a paranormal expert? What have you done to make yourself a paranormal expert? Nothing.
Read books. That's how you become an expert on anything.
Most of them haven't even read books. They've literally watched Most Haunted, and they're like, my God, I could do that.
That's a very poor reference point.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the point. Everything's a poor reference point. How do people know that stone is a natural conduit for spirits? Nobody knows that. But it's ridiculous.
But it might be, like, I don't actually know this, so this is a bit of a stab in the dark, but it might be based off of, like, ancient lore, as in Lore.
Oh, I think you said ancient law.
No.
I was like, oh, livid.
So, like, Native Americans and, like, the Druids and stuff like that, because they all their sort of, that sort of nature stuff is all based around elements, isn't it? That's the
yeah,
idea.
It is. That's true.
So maybe it is.
I don't know. Stone was an element, though.
Stone is one of the 6 elements. No, I'm just saying, like, it's natural, like,
you know, I know what you mean. I'm only just being facetious.
That's interesting. I think, like, the story of your place would be better if she was the matron and she was, like, keeping a watch over her inmates from the top office. Because that would be scary.
Yeah, they were inmates back in the day.
Yeah, but that's what it'd be scarier rather than her being a patient. But they could be, they're the same ghost, aren't they?
Well, I'm very sorry that my ghostly experience was not scary enough for you. Next time, I'll try and make sure that it's somebody that you want me to see.
Just do what everybody else does and fabricate a little bit of the detail.
Okay, I'll be like, and she was wearing a giant hat.
She had a badge on that said matron. No, it's just because I think, although what you've told us would suggest that they are the same ghost, there's 2 very different behaviours there, because the woman that was watching you is very ethereal and it seems very serious, whereas someone running past the doorway is very childlike and almost...
Well, it is, and that kind of... It brings me back to the point I originally made, where it's like, you will hang your hat on anything that anybody tells you. Not you specifically.
Well, I mean, no, because I do.
You also do, but that's not the point. But like, if I told him I saw this woman in a white dress and dark hair, and he immediately then grappled and grabbed hold of something that he had seen and imprinted what I had seen onto his, just so he could understand it, or to make it more accessible for himself. Because nobody wants to be able to say, like, you know, nobody wants to have to say, oh my God, I was so tired that I started hallucinating. But it does happen. Like, people with narcolepsy, because they don't sleep, they literally hallucinate. Yeah,
and I've done it plenty of times before myself.
Yeah, you have. You were ridiculous. But then I had like another incident when I was working in the asylum, and there was a patient who didn't mix with the other patients, and she couldn't speak, and, you know, she was completely non-verbal, but she used to sit in the middle of the floor, and I was cleaning the dormitory around her, and I left for about a minute and came back, and all the furniture had moved. Now, I immediately was like, shit, that's weird. But I hadn't seen her. I hadn't realised she was still there. Yeah. And she had really quickly gotten up and sort of stumbled about and moved all the furniture. Because I just moved it all back again. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen. And then I left and I came back and it had moved again. And then I realised she was there. She had just been hidden from my view.
Yeah.
But it would have been very easy for me to walk away and go, and all the furniture moved. It was like poltergeist.
So I think we're dealing with 2 separate ghosts here because it fits into my matron narrative. Because
why are you so obsessed with this matron narrative? Is this like some sort of thing that you've got going on?
It's not a kink or a fetish.
Is it?
No, it's not. I'm just thinking in terms of storyline. So, because looking at it as, let's say we're not talking about ghosts, let's say we're talking about people. Okay, so actual people. So you say you see a lady in the window.
Yeah.
And someone else sees someone run past them.
Yeah.
On multiple times. You would probably come to the conclusion in the natural world that they are 2 different things, right?
Yeah.
Because a lady that is very formal, not formally dressed, but just formal in the way that she carries herself, and something running past and energetic is opposites almost, aren't they? They're very different things. Yeah. You'd say one is probably a child, right? So that suggests to me that they are different entities, right, on the basis of that. Now, the guy said that the one that he saw had very similar characteristics, what you said, black hair, white dress. But he only ever saw it in his peripheral vision running past. If you think about someone running past you, you don't get any detail.
No, you don't.
You get a person, you wouldn't even be able to tell the sex of that person from something running in your peripheral. You wouldn't be able to see that.
No.
So to me, they're separate ghosts, and that means I can have a matron.
Okay, well, you have your matron then.
An evil matron.
Okay, you have
making sure that nobody leaves ever.
Okay, well, I left.
Or did patient. Yeah, did you? Yeah.
Or did I? But it is all about, like, I mean, the building itself, and I put this on our Instagram earlier, it used to be surrounded by 10-foot walls because the patients weren't medicated. And in a time before...
Or mental in a lot of cases. Like, they weren't actually ill. So you'd be trying to escape, wouldn't you? If someone just put you in there and there was nothing wrong with it.
The ones that there were that had mental illnesses or intellectual disabilities, obviously they weren't medicated at all.
Yeah.
And they had a 10-foot wall around the compound. And people, like, would say to me, oh, I remember when you'd hear them screaming. Hear them like they were, you know, a separate species. You could hear them screaming beyond the walls. And somebody actually wrote a book about it called When the Walls Came Tumbling Down.
Yeah.
I've never been able to get my hands on it. But somebody wrote a book about it because it was such an integral part of the town, this fear. And everyone just referred to it as the mental.
Yeah.
This fear of the mental. And it's still an operating psychiatric unit. But I worked in the part that was... for people with intellectual disabilities. But it is, you know, if you've got a building in your community that is so steeped in history and such a negative history, automatically when you walk into that building, you're going to be like, oh, I bet you it's haunted. I mean, I didn't, because I didn't really care. And I didn't really...
But I would have. I do that with every building I go in.
Every single building you're going to, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
It's haunted.
It's a new build. Yes, I bet it's haunted. Indian burial grounds.
Ancient Native American burial ground. Well, that's my story.
Yeah, it's a good story. I was going to say something, actually, but it slipped my mind, so I'm not going to be able to say.
You keep doing this. You're like the worst person to have a podcast.
It's because I have like 1,000 thoughts at a minute, and I just have to grasp at them. But that's what I was going to say. So also, there's a tendency towards the negative and the dramatic as well, isn't there? So if you said, "Oh, I was working in the psychiatric unit and I saw an angel," everybody would go, "Yeah, right, okay." But if you said, "Oh, I was working in the psychiatric unit and I saw a ghost or even a demon," everybody would be like, "Oh."
That's very true, actually.
Because there's a tendency towards the dramatic. It's not very, like, if you say, you know, the nice ghost, the friendly ghost, like Casper.
Yeah, who's real.
He's the exception, to be fair.
It's actually a documentary.
He's got a movie franchise. But the nice ghosts are the ones that you hear less about, aren't they, really? Nobody really cares a lot about them. Even if you think about, and I know this is like the 18th reference, but even if you think about Ghost Adventures, the time that they spend on the ghosts that are just doing like normal things is very minimal. And the time they spend on the ghosts that are apparently attacking them is because it makes for better television. It makes for better story. People like dramatic, don't they?
That's true. Okay, should we leave it there?
Yeah, why not?
Should we wrap it up?
Yep.
If you want to contact us, which I'm absolutely sure everybody who hears this podcast will want to contact us. I don't even know if anybody's going to listen to it.
Have we got a contact?
Yeah.
Oh,
all of our, like, 2 listeners, who's going to be me and you.
I'll send you a message later.
Yeah, thanks. We have, your story was shit.
Definitely a matron.
Signed, guess who? P.S. Why were there no matrons? Our email is reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. I did this earlier, by the way.
Look at this, new knowledge.
And our Twitter is @realghostpod because our name was too long to have an actual Twitter handle, which is very annoying.
So is ours.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll give you a little shout out when I'm famous, don't worry. And our Instagram is Real Life Ghost Stories. So come and speak to us. I'm going to try every time we do an episode to put up pictures and stuff. I've put up pictures on Instagram and Twitter of the asylum that I used to work in, so you can see that it's actually real. How exciting. And Dan has seen it in real life.
I have.
Yeah, it's quite an intimidating building.
It's a very intimidating building.
And it's also opposite a prison, which does not help with the whole aesthetic.
But it's good for learner journeys.
It's good for what?
Progress. Journeys. It was a bad joke.
Oh, I didn't get it.
No, it's not really funny. That's why.
I didn't get it. And so if you enjoyed it, make sure that you let us know. And if you hated it, don't bother telling us because we'll know by the lack of interaction. But thank you for listening.
Venture X from Capital One is the travel card for people always asking,
where next?
You earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars, and 5x miles on flights booked through Capital One Travel, and 2x miles on everything else you buy with Venture X. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.